swiveling on heel, mostly interested in getting the hell out of there so he could find out where the hell he was. John all but dashed across the terminal, hardly paying any attention to his surroundings, or more specifically, the metal detector he passed through. Naturally, the detector went off. John didn't even have time to swear before he found himself tackled by both massive guards, driven to the ground and knocked senseless on the cold tile floor. John had been dragged to the nearby security office to properly deal with his criminal metal possession felony. It took about 5 hours, which, because the office's clock was broken, felt like 5 years, to work out the misunderstanding. As it turned out, a pocket full of loose change, which had chosen not to make any noise when John had run, had set off the metal detector. Of course, it took an incredibly awkward strip search to accomplish this, and the sight of the latex gloves that the security officer had drawn out had driven John into a fit of groveling and near sobbing. Some small measure of mercy had finally been provided, saving John from the cavity search, but he had nonetheless received a stern and very long speech about ensuring the safety of your fellow convict before his possessions were finally returned. John had asked what they meant by convict, but the question had been pretty much ignored. The possessions he received was the pocket full of change, the BlackBerry, which was in low power mode, a bottle of Advil, and finally the pamphlet titled Moving Forwards, One Innovation at a Time. Too rattled by his near violation, John tucked everything away again in his pockets, hardly giving them a second thought. Carefully moving across the terminal now, the steady slew of disasters leaving him a bit paranoid. His head darted from side to side, as if expecting something else to leap out and search him. But yet again, the terminal was deserted, lacking even the crowd that had witnessed his humiliation earlier. Finally, he stopped at a snack machine near the exit, his purposeful escape route delayed as he considered the dispenser. The shining chrome and metal contraption was mostly empty, but there were still a few chocolate bar and chip selections to choose from. Well, a snack would probably help settle my nerves, John thought sullenly, shaking his head. And I can figure out where I am, and for that matter, why. Reaching into his pocket for the change, he extracted all of it into one palm, and began to silently count the nickels, dimes, and pennies as he approached. By the time he reached the machine, he determined that he had $1.22. Squinting slightly, he glanced at the remaining chocolate bars, which were amassed along the top 2 rows. $1.25. Damn. Shaking his trousers and suit jacket in an attempt to force some missed change to reveal itself, he did hear a musical jingle around his left pant pocket. Reaching in, however, he could find nothing. Even patting the entire leg turned up no bumps that suggested coins. Worst of all, he was starting to feel hungry. Irritation turned into mild relief as he saw that the chips on the bottom rungs of the machines were only $1. Shaking his head and muttering to himself some more, John straightened and began carefully feeding change into the machine, one coin after another. Once the last coin was in, he keyed in the proper sequence for a bag of regular chips. Nothing happened. After pressing the sequence 4 more times, John caught sight of the small money display just above the keypad. 98 cents. Well, that can't be right. Shaking his head, John took a couple steps back and glanced at the floor, seeing if maybe he dropped any change. He even got in his belly, peeking under the snack machine, but no coins revealed themselves. After another futile pat-down of his clothing, he finally pressed the change return slot. He only got 85 cents back. When he limped painfully towards the front door, his foot aching from the solid kick he had given the machine. He once more found that he was not alone. Standing just inside the door, an impeccably groomed man in a full tux stood, expressionless as he held up a large sign. The sign said, "John Myler." John wandered over, straightening his worn suit jacket self-consciously. He was effectively ignored, even when he stood directly in front of the man with the sign, and it was after a few moments that John cleared his throat loudly. The other man turned his head slightly, arching a brow. "Can I help you, sir?" "Yeah, actually." Nodding, John gestured at the sign. I think you might be here for me." "Well, are you John Myler?" A pause, and another clearing of the throat. "Well, actually, no. I'm John Miller." "Well, apologies, sir, but I am looking for a Mr. John Myler." "Right, well, you sure you don't have it misspelled?" "Sir?" "The name!" That came out a bit louder than John had intended, and so the rest was virtually a murmur. I mean, isn't it possible that you made a small mistake in spelling the name, which would lead to the mistaken pronunciation?" "Why, sir, are you expecting a car?" "No." Yes, I am," John barked, doing his best to look like someone who could order a personal driver on a whim. The fact that he wore clothing which could only have been considered formal or even presentable 10 years ago made a considerable dent in this, along with the fact that his entire body was trembling slightly. Still, after being stared at suspiciously for a little while, the driver finally nodded, stepping back and gesturing to the door. Nodding briskly, clearing his throat, and doing his best to maintain the self-confident facade, John stepped out of the building. He wasn't terribly surprised to see that nothing outside helped to provide a clue as to where he was. Beyond the airport's deserted runways, there was only a long dirt road and a yellow field that seemed to stretch out for an eternity in all directions. The car in question was nothing short of a limo, impeccably polished until the black paint job was gleaming in the sunlight. The driver strode to the door and pulled it open, expressionless as he gestured to the plush seat inside. A little pleased now, John climbed in, daring to hope that maybe things would start looking up for him. No such luck.